Hello. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to day 3 of Who Do You Think You Are 2014. Before we start, I'd just like to thank our sponsors, Family Tree DNA, who you'll find at the stand over there. And they have sponsored this series of DNA lectures, which has been organised by the International Society of Genetic Genealogy. And we are graced today with the presence of the Director of the International Society of Genetic Genealogy, Katherine Borges, who comes from North California, from the town of Salida. And Katherine has been director of the society since about 2005, and has been involved in DNA for a lot longer than that, really, and has a variety of different DNA projects running on Family Tree DNA. You may even be a member of one of them as we speak. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Katherine to you. She's going to talk today about the basics of DNA testing, so could I ask you all to give her a warm welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Morris. So can I get a show of hands real quick? How many of you are brand new to trying DNA testing Okay, one. Okay, that's better. Good, they're making me feel better. I didn't want to be speaking on basics to a room full of experts. Okay, so I'm going to just, it's not advancing, Morris. Oh, there it goes, it wasn't on, sorry. Okay, so I just want to share with you, because we just have a brief amount of time, and there's so much to know and learn about using DNA for ancestry purposes. But the 3 most important things you need to know are the different types of DNA tests that are available, how the DNA is transmitted through your body, because you don't have just one kind of DNA, you have many different, multiple kinds of DNA, and how the DNA testing could work for you for your ancestry and genealogy purposes. So the first and most popular kind of DNA test to come out traces the Y chromosome, and that is the male gender chromosome. It's also referred to as surname testing. So, but only males have the male gender chromosome, obviously, so they're the only ones that can do it. But females can recruit a male relative to test. That's known as testing by proxy. So like for my maiden name, I've had my brother test. My maiden name is Bolt, so again, if anybody has any Bolt ancestry or know any, come see me later. But so for this kind, you need a male to test. The next kind is a mitochondrial DNA test, and that is DNA that's passed down the maternal line. Now, males have it, but they do not pass it on to their children. The children receive it from their mother. This SMP test is also called a SNP test, and it's much easier to say SMP or SNP than to try to say single nucleotide polymorphism. But what SNP testing does is it confirms your deep ancestry on either the Y chromosome line or on the mitochondrial DNA line. The only company that does automatic SNP testing for mitochondrial DNA is Family Tree DNA. And then they do a prediction for the Y chromosome, but they do have SNP tests that can confirm it. And as science advances, it gets more refined all the time. And then the last kind of testing is autosomal DNA, and that's the DNA that you receive from both your parents. But it doesn't go back as far in time as these other 3. This one is for more recent generations, about 5 generations back. I usually tell people, say 16 to 1700s is about as far back as you can get with this, but it covers more of your lines than these do. Where does DNA come from? So every once in a while we get a question where someone will say, well, how do I get my ancestors' DNA? Do I have to dig them up? Well, fortunately, no, you don't, because you have the DNA in you. So just by testing yourself is how you get it. But they do get DNA from ancient remains, and I'm sure you've seen the media articles, and I have some more in here too. But on this particular one, I use Marie Antoinette because she's got a fascinating case, and everybody knows who she is. She had a lock of her hair preserved in a locket, and it had been untouched, for hundreds of years. Because the thing with hair is hair tends to break down faster, the DNA in hair. Plus, it also, when people touch it, it gets contaminated. But because it was in a locket, it wasn't being contaminated, and they were able to get viable maternal line DNA out of it. And then in around the early 2000s, they found a goblet under a cathedral in Paris that was labeled with her son's name. And sorry, this is kind of gross, but it had a petrified heart inside the goblet. And so they did DNA testing on that, and it matched the hair of the locket. So in 2004, they had a state funeral for her son. So normally, though, you don't get your ancestors' DNA this way. But I think as technology advances, we'll see more of this kind of testing come out. At least I'm hoping, because I have, for instance, my grandfather's a McCallum from Scotland. And our line in America is dotted out. So I either have to get the remote chance of finding a McCallum in Scotland to do a Y chromosome test for me, or I have an envelope with my grandfather licked the stamp on it. So I have that in a Ziploc baggie in a safe in my house. It's 50 years old, and I'm hoping that technology will advance. I can get viable DNA out of it. And then, but the typical way that we get it is from living descendants like all of us here, and it's just from a simple swab of saliva from inside the mouth. That's the kind of testing that family tree DNA and many companies do as a swab, but there are ones that also have you expectorate to a vial, which some people don't like, but it's better than a blood test, which is what they did in the early days. So this is the path of DNA. One of the things, even for myself when I first started doing this in 2003, that I had to master and get down was the transmission paths of DNA. So this is the path of the Y chromosome. So just like, especially in most Western European countries, but as you'll see later, not all Western European countries, the Y chromosome is passed down to the male child from his father, who received it from his father, from his father. So that's why it's also called surname testing. But as many of you know, especially in countries like Wales, who were late to adopt a patriarchal surname system, and also with Ireland and Scotland, which are clan countries, people would take clan surnames as a protectorate, so not everybody in a clan is going to match. This is a Y chromosome phylotree, and see how it says Adam in quotes? So it's the tree of man, and then these are corresponding SNP numbers, so that's the ancient DNA. And right here with these letter combinations, most people in Europe especially are R. R is like an alpha, I call it alpha haplogroup. And it means Western European, but not everybody here is. But by looking at the DNA on the ancestry level, and that's what a SNP test confirms, it can give you a clue about your origins. This is what when you do a DNA test, this is what you'll receive is a certificate that looks like this. And it has different markers that are tested and then a value of that marker. But it doesn't really derive information until you're able to compare it to others with the same surname. This particular surname originates in Northern Ireland, is where his ancestor comes from. And then at Family Tree DNA, they have what are called surname projects that you can add your results to for free. And most surnames do have a project, not all, but most do, it seems. So this particular one, he was an early one to test. And so because he tested and he knew that his ancestor was from Northern Ireland, other people, this person was Brickwater, Virginia, by him testing and having a paper trail, he was able to connect it to that line. So where surname testing really derives its relevance is when you're able to compare it to other males with the same surname, and also for the origins. Again, the R is like the alpha haplogroup in Western Europe, and all of these, they have a Western European origin. Now, what's interesting is as science advances and they keep doing studies, we're going to see these, and we already are too, able to be refined to a particular place. So for example, in 2006, Trinity University in Dublin came out with a study on Klein O'Neill, the Nile of the Nine Hostages, and so men that have that particular signature know that on their surname line, even if their surname is not O'Neill, because again, you have the clan system, they know that they come from Northern Ireland. Now this particular gentleman, he doesn't have the M222 marker, the Nile, but he is very close to what's called Scots modal. So he's right here, and all the markers that are green here are all ones that indicate that he's of a Scottish origin. So that's another thing. Besides being able to group to your surname, it can also tell you about your origins like that. One of the projects, as I mentioned earlier, my mother's father's McCallum, and the line is dotted out in America. So myself and the Clan McCallum president set up the McCallum Project. And one of the really neat and interesting things about the McCallum Project is that they have different variants of the name. So there's McCallum, spelled with an A, without an A, and then Malcolm. And then also McCollum. That it's being able to see that even all of these males right here all like have different variations of the clan name, McCollum, Malcolm, McCallum, but this particular cluster is all related. Now, as you can see, I have a group 1, group 2, group 3, and so on and so forth. And one of the reasons why is because, as I mentioned earlier, men took clan name as a protectorate, so they're not all going to have the same common ancestor, but you are, even if they immigrated out to other countries, or if they stayed in Scotland, or even in Ireland, because McCallum is also in Ireland, you're able to tell who has a common ancestor by being able to group the results. As I mentioned a little while ago too, most European countries, or Western European countries, have a patriarchal surname system. However, Portugal did not adopt one until the 1900s, sorry. In 1900, they adopted one. Before that, what they did was they would either use the mother's maiden name. Sometimes you can look at Portuguese records and half of the children will have the father's name, the other half will have the mother's name. Or they would take the names of noble ancestors like Betancourt and Avila, are two noble ancestors that you see. So it's really hard to do Portuguese genealogy with the name changes. However, their records are really good. They have records that rival some in England that go back almost 1,000 years. But when you have, if you know anyone that's Portuguese, or even this would apply to Welsh too, is you can have males of different surnames. Like this one says Serpa, and then this is Machado Borges. This is my son's DNA, and he got a match to a Serpa that only lives about 80 miles away from me in California. So that's one of the powers of DNA testing too, is you can get through brick walls even if the surnames don't match. And again too, even if it's a country that doesn't have a patriarchal surname system. Another thing that we did with the Portuguese DNA is that we compared it to a scientific study. And the Borges study was done in Portugal, and my husband's ancestors had immigrated to the Azores. The Azores were first settled in the 1430s. So they've been in these islands for 600 years. But through DNA and using a scientific study, we're able to get a point of origin in Porto, Portugal, which, if I remember correctly, is in northern Portugal. So again, by using just recreational genetic genealogy, DNA testing, we're able to find a match to the continent without the paper trail, but by comparing it to a scientific study. And this is the paper too. A lot of these papers you can access just through Google. You just put in what you're looking for, and especially there's a browser called Google Scholar that you can find a lot of these papers online for free. Another thing that you get when you do the Y chromosome DNA testing is you get origins, you get a mapping system. So like the Serpa that my son matched, it shows what islands that the matches are from. So that's another thing that you get in the system, which can really help you to pinpoint where your ancestor might be from, especially if you're stud or other cousin matches. Another project that I run is lions. And when I started this project in 2000, again, if anybody knows any lions, come see me, or lion, or variants of lion. Ligon is a variant. I started this project for my husband, because my husband has his lion is brick-walled in New York in 1809. And I had to wait. Sometimes you have to wait a few years to get a match. You have to be patient, because while Family Tree DNA has the largest database out there, they have, I think it's around 700,000 samples. If you think about it, 700,000 people, that's, there's cities, London's bigger than that. So sometimes you have to be patient and wait. So I had to wait a couple of years, but I got a lion match that came in through National Geographic Project. And while this gentleman's paper trail was not farther than my husband, he was stuck in the 1850s, the thing is, lion appears in 5 countries. It appears in France, England, Scotland, Ireland, and Germany. And because this man had his paper trail to England, that narrowed down which country for me to focus on, even though it wasn't farther back. Well, later on, in doing the Lions Project, there's this one lion's line that came in, supposedly was William the Conqueror. So that's how old a paper trail is back. In fact, you can find the book on Google, just by Googling it. The Lions Memorial is the name of the book. And the Queen Mum, her lion's line is connected to that line. And what's interesting too is that this particular line, I mean, a portion of them stayed in England, but there's also a branch that went to Scotland. So this Scottish lion line originated from this English one originally. And then I just found out last year that I have an ancestor that's a lion from this particular line. So even though I'm a female, I don't have the lion last name. I didn't even know I had a lion ancestor until last year. But because this already existed, and I didn't have to pay for this either, you're able to find other lines of yours that may have already tested just by checking their database. On the path of mitochondrial DNA, as I mentioned earlier, the female child receives it from her mother, who receives it from her mother, and so on back. Well, male children do too, but males don't pass it on. There's the example for the male child. So it doesn't do any of this in between. It's just the direct lines for MTD, and then that's for Y. This is what a mitochondrial DNA certificate looks like. This is for my father, and he is a haplogroup H, which is kind of like the equivalent of R here in Europe. It's the most common one available, and my father's ancestors on his mitochondrial line, this is my grandmother, and she was born here in Woolwich. So she immigrated to the U.S. and then married my grandfather as an American. And this is my great-grandmother and great-great-grandmother, and these 2 ladies are from Aberdeen, Scotland. Now my father does have a match on his mitochondrial DNA to others in Scotland, but I haven't yet found like I don't yet have a success story, but it's good for the origins. The other thing I wanted to mention too about this is my grandmother was the only child, my father was an only child. I started doing DNA testing back in 2003, and that's the same year my father died. So I started in May, and my dad, I had the kit sent to him, and he actually procrastinated on doing the swabbing of his mouth. So I had to go down to visit him on a holiday, and I said, "Daddy, I need you to do this DNA test." So I sat there while he swabbed his mouth, grumbling away, and got his DNA, and then the next month they found out he had cancer, and then by November he was dead. But I'm telling you this story because it's a reason why you don't want to procrastinate, because if I had not gotten my dad to swab when he did, I would be out of luck. I would have no source for this DNA because, again, they're coming from only children. Although, when I was going through my dad's things after he died, I found a box that was silver and ornate, and I opened it, and my grandmother had written on the envelope, "Hair snipped from my mother's head as she laid in her coffin in 1915. She died of TB in 1915. So I slammed the box shut. I wrapped it up in paper, and I wrote, "Do not open to prevent contamination." Because just in case I ever need it, since I don't have any other sources. However, because I had tested my father at Family Tree DNA in 2003, they're the only company that offers free storage banking, DNA banking. So I was able to upgrade his kit and get his mitochondrial DNA after he died, because they store the DNA for 25 years. So now what I'm waiting for is I'm waiting for them to come out with a full genome test, because then I don't have to do anything beyond that. I just have to be patient until they offer that. They won't offer it yet. And this is my dad, and that's me. So obviously I don't have his mitochondrial DNA, I have my mother's. One of the things that you can use mitochondrial DNA for genealogy purposes, but it's a little more difficult. This is a basic HBR1 and 2 test. Over there it's known as an mtDNA plus test, and it's for 35 pounds. But if you have a mystery, just like this one with the Kelly sisters, you can confirm the paper trail with this. And so these two descendants down here that are direct female line descendants from Martha and Katherine Kelly, they thought that they might be sisters, but they weren't sure. So they did the DNA test, they matched each other, and it corroborated that the common ancestor is Elizabeth Cummins. Now this is my mitochondrial line ancestor, and I descend from Irish famine immigrants that originated out of Cork, Ireland, sorry, fun country, Cork, Ireland. They went to America, they settled in Chicago. They were Irish by all, looking in records, all external purposes, they were Irish. They're listed as Irish in the census. They are listed as Catholic in the parishes. However, when I did the DNA test, I got a bit of a surprise because my DNA is not Irish. It's not indigenous to Ireland. I was not expecting that. Sometimes you do get surprises. My DNA is actually very rare, and it's an N is what I am. I'm a mitochondrial N, and it originates in primarily Eastern Europe. All of my matches are in Italy. So what I think the hypothesis is, because there's no paper trail, so I can't come up with any other thing than a hypothesis as to what this mystery is with not being indigenous to Ireland, is that my long ago female ancestor went into England with the Romans and then went into Ireland during Cromwell's reign. And I do have one little tiny clue that she might not be, Irish, of Irish origin, and that's because her surname is English, and English is not an Irish surname. Her name is Julia English. But so, they may have, come in through Cromwell and settled in one of those populations and then, assimilated. But that was something really interesting that I found out from my mitochondrial DNA. Now, on autosomal DNA, as I mentioned earlier, it goes back, covers all lines to about the 5th cousin level. So, you get several things from the autosomal DNA test, and they have it over there for 60 pounds. This is my brother. Now, siblings, even though siblings inherit 50% of their DNA from each parent, they don't inherit an exact 50%. Like, I didn't get 50% of my mother's ancestry and 50% of my father's. We might have gotten something more like, I could have gotten 70% of my mother's and 30% of my father's, that kind of thing. And the reason I know this is because my brother shows up as 100% European, but I show up with this, I call it a pie slice of Jewish DNA. And I don't have any known Jewish ancestry. However, I do have a set of great-grandparents that immigrated from Bohemia, which is now Austria. And I haven't researched it farther because I don't speak German or Czechoslovakian, Czech. So I have not researched it further, but I'm guessing that's where it came from. But I inherited that and my brother didn't. Now on the other rest of the 100% European, when they will update their database, automatically it does not cost anything extra, and when they do it, you'll see it is separate into Scotland, Ireland, and other nationalities that I have in my ancestry. I do have some early colonial English. This one right here, this is my son's result, and he's got more Jewish than I do because he got some from my husband. I'm guessing my husband's is from Sephardic Portuguese Jewish ancestry, but I also, my husband has Native American, so my son has this additional pizza slice of Native American DNA. To me, being a female, this is one of the most powerful things about this test, is that you can, not only do you get the ancestors back to the 5th generation, but it's gender blind. Because all these years I've had to sweet talk these males into, male cousins into letting me be a proxy for their Y chromosomes. And now I can take this test and see my father's DNA in me, even though I don't have a Y chromosome. So these people are my known cousins. He's my first cousin once removed, the Wallace. And because he's more closely related to me, I'm the dark blue, he's the orange. So we have more ancestors in common. These two are my 4th cousins, and they're all related to me through the bolts, my maiden name. So where you see an overlap, where there's this orange, this green, and the blue, I know when I look at that, I'm looking at bolt DNA. Now, one of the things, too, that this can be really powerful besides, being a female and testing for your maiden name line and not having to have a male be a proxy for it, is also when you have brick wall female line ancestors. You know how in records it'll say, John's wife Mary, and there are no maiden names given. You can, by matching up to other people that have that DNA in common, you can get their maiden names out of that. I have a case with a Vic from Isle of Wight, and I only have 4 lines from Isle of Wight. I have Fuller, Spivey, Avent, and Littleton. And so these Vics match me, and I don't have a Vic ancestor, so I know that they're matching me through the wife's line. And because I know that I only have those 4 lines, that's one of those 4. So eventually we'll be able to narrow it down to one of those 4 surnames for the wife. Another thing that you get with the Family Finder test is you're able to do genealogical matching. This is my son's results. This is me, my husband, and my brother. The computer automatically, but it knows because of the amount of DNA that you share, it can predict how you're related. So it says parent or child, and then over here you can confirm it. And I left this one to say uncle and pending so that you can see what that looks like, because sometimes you'll have people that will email you and say, okay, you're my second cousin once removed, and you might not know that you are. So it's good that you're able to confirm it, because you wouldn't want someone to label you that and you don't yet know. And then if you and the person you match have uploaded their surnames, then they will automatically highlight those in the computer. So all of my sons are highlighted, obviously, because they're matching us. But normally you'll just see a couple of those bolded and not the entire thing. But that's another very powerful thing that it does with as far as the matching goes. I added these slides last night because one of the speakers here yesterday was Chris Stringer, and there's an exhibit over at the Natural History Museum. It's called 1 Million Years of Human History. We have a poster about it by the ISOGG stall, and they have tested celebrities. And at the very end of the exhibit, you can watch a video, and that's what I took. I sat there taking pictures of the video when I went to the exhibit on Wednesday. Of the various celebrities, but I'm not going to show you all of them because I want to force you to go watch it. But it's really interesting. They did DNA testing of them through the National Genographic Project, which the Genographic Project uses family tree DNA for their testing. In fact, you can upload your results for free into their database when you test their genographic. So if Kevin wanted to, then he could upload his results. So he got, these are the, like the SNP results that I mentioned earlier, the deep ancestry. So this one is for his mitochondria, and he matches me up to about there, because as I mentioned to you, I'm an N, but then he's one branch farther down from me on the mitochondrial tree, and then over here are his haplogroup numbers for his paternal line. Another thing that you can do with the genographic test that you don't see offered much at other companies is you can do a test for Neanderthals. And Neanderthals have gotten a bad rap most of the time through the years. But this article mentions that that we may have underrated them, that they're smarter than we think, because what scientists did is they did a lab test where they tried to create tools, hand tools that were used by Neanderthals. And it took a modern human 18 months to reproduce a hand tool that they had created. So that's why they feel that they were underrated and could be smarter. So it's not necessarily an insult if you find out you have DNA in common with a Neanderthal, because as you can see, Clyde Anderson does. He's got 1.8%. And this is my result. I have just a little smidgen less than he does. This is my results from the Geno 2.0 test of National Geographic. And this is another early hominid, a Denisovan. Now, it doesn't currently show that I have any Denisovan DNA in common with a Denisovan, but that could change. So a lot of times when databases are updated, you see numbers change. They're not always static. So as Morris said in the introduction, I'm the director of ISOGG, the International Society of Genetic Genealogy. We have a stall over there. I believe the number is 400. And we are free. We do not charge any dues or fees, because we believe that if you have any extra spending money, or that you should not use it for more societies, you should spend it on DNA testing. So We do all of our help and promotion and everything that you need for free. We do conferences like this. We have online help an email list where you can get questions, because there is a big learning curve to this. I mean, I've been doing this now for 10 years, well no, 11 years, and I know a lot. I don't know it all. I know a lot though, but you have to really work at it. You have to be proactive. Another thing you can do is you can read books. This one is a bestseller that came out in the year 2000, and it includes some stories of famous DNA cases, and it's a really good starter book for mitochondrial DNA. I highly recommend it to people. You might even be able to find it at your library, local library. This one I include because we're at the Who Do You Think You Are conference, but this is the American version of the show. And the book is dated, it's from when it first came out, and the show was on NBC, but it does include celebrity profiles in it. It's also a great book if you're a beginning genealogist. I highly recommend it. I often give the book as gifts because it has a lot of great starter information. Two other books that I recommend, and they are both speakers here at this conference in this DNA area, are Chris Pomeroy's Family History in the Gene, which is available from the National Archives at Kew, and Debbie Kennett's DNA and Social Networking. And that's all I have, and thank you very much, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Okay, this should be on now. Fine. Who would like to kick off with questions? Anyone has any questions?
If you don't want to raise your hand, you can always come up to me afterwards too.
Because Katherine will be outside hanging around the stand if anybody has any questions during the day. But does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask? We have a gentleman down here.
On the male DNA test, how many similarities have got to be there? And how many differences?
So it depends on how many markers you test. But I want to go back and show you something on my lions, because you can have, I mean, somebody can give you one number as far as similarities go, even the computer over there can give you a number, but there's always things that occur that are kind of an outlier. So when you see these markers, like some of these markers are known as fast-moving markers. They change more rapidly in the Y chromosome than others, and that's helpful for identifying out different patterns of DNA. As you can see, these ones that are different colors. But I had this lion, this one right here from Michigan, and he did the DNA test, and he started out at 12 markers. And he wanted to know if he was related to this lion. That was his big mystery. He wanted to find out if he was to this particular lion line that the queen comes from. And so he did a 12-marker test, which is a basic test, and usually you match males with the same surname and other names. And it's not a very refined one. It's good for deep ancestral origins. Well, he had only done the 12 marker, and then when I had the one that's from Sir Adam Lyon, let's see, where's Sir Adam Lyon? I think it might be this one. But anyways, oh no, William Lyon of Roxbury. When this lion tested, I sent the other guy an email, and I said, we've got a descendant from William of Roxbury. You might want to upgrade to more markers. So he did. He first upgraded to Michigan. He upgraded to 25. Well, he's got a mutation there, and he's got a mutation there. So he had him in the first two panels. So he still didn't show as a match, and it wasn't until he got to the 37 marker level he showed as a match. So the 12 marker test, which is the one over there that's 35 pounds, that one is, you can match males within the last 1,000 years time frame. But the 37 marker, which, what is it over there? I think it's 80. It's a little jet lag, so I think it's 80 pounds. That one refines it down to a 300 to 400 year time frame. That's the one I normally recommend for people to start with. If you have a more common surname like Smith, Jones, there's a Matthews that was here earlier, names like that, you might even want to go more than that. They have a 67 and a 111. So it just depends, but you can always upgrade later, and you don't have to test again. They can just upgrade your kit, and I'm half Scots, so I'm thrifty by nature, and I wait for them to have sales, because they have sales at the holidays and in the summertime. Did that help answer? Okay, good.
That's great. Thank you very much for that question. Another question down here.
These markers, are they single bases, or are there sequences of bases?
These particular ones are just various spots on the Y chromosome that they've identified, because the Y chromosome has millions and millions of markers on it, but they found sections that were good for using for ancestry testing, and especially in certain areas that are, as I said earlier, slow moving, slow mutating, so that you can match people within, the last hundreds to thousands of years. Does that help answer the question?
How long are
How long are the sequences?
The most that they go to commercially is 111 markers. So that's as long as it gets right now, except for, SNPs, but that's different, that's more deep ancestry. But for genealogical purposes, the most it goes to right now is 111. But it keeps, again, science keeps advancing. So when I first started, it was 12. And then we thought it was a big deal when it was 25. So now we're at 111, 11 years later.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of the actual length of the sequences, if it's a SNP marker, that's just a single nucleotide, so a single base. But if it's an STR, you can get repeats of maybe 3 or 4 bases repeated 13 times in a row, which is where you get your single short tandem repeats, they're called, STRs, short tandem repeats. And they can go on for quite a while. I think CDYA and CDYB are 40. They have 40 repeats of a particular sequence of bases, so you're looking at maybe 100 to 200 bases in a row.
Thank God they simplified that for us, right?
Another question? Everybody understands everything? Really? I find that hard to believe. Like Katherine says, it is a slow burn. So and the great thing about genealogy, it isn't you don't do it for 1 year and then give it up. This is a lifelong hobby. So I think what you'll get from here is that there's still plenty more to discover. We have a question here.
I'm helping my husband research his family tree. I've come to a brick wall in his father's line, basically because there's no father recorded for his father. Do you think something like this might be able to help me figure
Is
something
your
out?
father still alive? No. Do you have a brother that you could test from your father's line?
No, it's my husband's.
Oh, your husband?
It's my husband's father my husband's grandfather on his father's side that we can't find.
So is your husband still alive?
My husband's still alive, yeah.
Oh, good. So you can test him for that, and that should help you. At least 37, if not more.
Okay.
The Y DNA test is actually very, very good for people who have adoptees or who have illegitimacies in their line. So this lady's example, it's her husband's father's father, that's where the kind of brick wall hits. In my well-named study, the Spearn study, we had a chap who, on paper, it looked like he came from Limerick, where all of us came from, but then when the results came through, he did not match anybody. So there obviously had been what we call a non-paternity event. Now, when I first heard that, I immediately, being an Irish Catholic, I thought of a virgin birth, possibly an immaculate conception. I was a little bit naive, but it doesn't mean that. It means a secret adoption, an illegitimacy, a legal name change. You can only marry my daughter if you take my name, that type of thing. Oliver Cromwell was not born Oliver Cromwell. He took his wife's name because she was of higher social status to him. So that's the way that the surname can actually break, the line of descent of the surname can break. But this particular chap in the project, when his results came back, he didn't match anybody, but he only had 3 matches on his Y chromosome. And they went back to somebody called Denman. So that immediately gave him an idea who the interloper was, or at least what the surname of the interloper was likely to be. So it's a very, very good way, if you have an adoptee or an illegitimacy in one of your ancestral lines, particularly on your direct male line, of finding the likely surname of the person that probably intruded somewhere along the way.
You should also do a plug for your family, because you talk about adoptees and the surname lines.
Oh yes, and if there are any people with adoptees or illegitimacies out in the audience, well, DNA Adoption is a group of people from America who've done a huge amount of work with adoptees, trying to connect them with their biological families, and they have a variety of different tools and utilities available on their website that you can use. So if you do
I was
have...
referring to your panel, what you're talking about in your panel talk.
That's the one, yes. And my particular lady, yeah. One of my closest matches on the Family Finder test, which is the autosomal DNA, I got an email from her daughter who said, "Oh, you're a close match. Do you know where we're connected?" And she told this amazing story. Her mother is 84. Earlier last year, they managed to. Her mother was adopted, so she didn't know who her mother was, didn't know who her father was. Earlier last year, they actually found out living descendants of her mother, and they were in touch with them, and early last year they got a letter from Australia which had a photograph in it. So at the age of 84, this lady saw her mother for the first time. So you never know what you will find. You never know what you will find.
He's got a different surname. Tony Blair's not Blair.
Tony Blair is not a Blair.
No, he's not. In fact, John Blair, who's out there, he can tell you what his real surname is. And also the Blair that leads back to they call it the Blair of Blair. He's also not a Blair.
As if Labour didn't have enough trouble. Anyway, we'll call it a day there, but thanks very much for your attention. And Katherine, thank you very much for an excellent presentation.
Thank you. Oh, right, I'm presuming that must be a fairly recent adoption, so really she should be able to get access to all the file. some I go into the public record office. I'm going to go into the admissions file for when my mother was born, because apparently the indication of the natural mother is that she was admitted in the wild birth. But when she left, we got that information from a social worker who, back in the days when I first started, research and finding information. But I don't know how she went on to find out when my mother actually was. So I want to find out if my mother was left in the infirmary or not, you know. And that might take a whole lot of time for me. I think that it's what a lot of people do, is they get one family it is, isn't it? I don't like when people see it. I find it too confusing. Like a tiny bit of
Hello, how are you?
Yeah, I'm fine, thanks. Are you?
Oh, not too bad, not too bad. Keeping body and soul together, just about. Now, I need to